Okay, so someone's coming in. So a brief run through the agenda. We're just going to do a quick access check-in, make sure everyone's comfortable. Then we're asking each of you to share a bit of your organization's services relating to neurodivergence. We did that at the last network and it was really useful. So we'd appreciate any information you have. If you don't provide support for neurodivergent people directly, just some experience you've had, either being a neurodivergent person yourself or supporting a neurodivergent colleague. If you're not comfortable speaking those experiences out loud, you can just paste it in the chat. Then my lovely colleague Laura will be giving her experience on reasonable adjustments. We'll have a 5-minute Q&A, we'll have a little comfort break, and then we'll go into breakout room discussions, because I'm very keen for this network for it to be led by you. You know, we're here to facilitate, but we want to hear about your own experiences and solutions to challenges. We'll then have feedback from the breakouts, and I'll give you a very short funding update. So just as a reminder for everyone, the Inclusion Network goal is to create a space where you can share your lived experience as either a neurodivergent person working in the nonprofit sector or your experience supporting neurodivergent team members. The goal of this session in particular is to look at barriers and potential solutions for neuro-inclusion. And as I said, we are the facilitator, we organize the session. We also provide sort of basic training about little things you can do to make your organization more inclusive. We have training available as e-learning and as a live session. The next session is in November, which seems ages away, but it will come up quickly. This network is not for the general public. It's for nonprofit employees and volunteers only. If you are a member, if you know someone who's a member of the public, there's loads of great support services. You know, we've got Space for Autism, Autism Inclusive, and many more. We're planning these about quarterly. That was the feedback that you all gave at the last session. We'll be doing them online, and we are co-producing it with all of you who are part of this network and other neurodivergent specialists. Got something in the chat. Oh, yeah, no problem, Alison. So just an update from our last network. We've been busy working on our neuro-inclusion page. So you can visit that. I'll just mute you, Alison, sorry. Visit that website. I'll include a link to that after this meeting. We've got different sections in there. So we have a training section where you can find different training depending on your needs. There's employer resources, things like a neurodivergence employer's toolkit. There's templates for reasonable adjustments and lots more. So have a look. I also wanted to mention there is a new Cheshire Mornington Inclusive Employer Network, which I had a chat with the lovely Emma from Pettypool. They're running it. Unfortunately, she couldn't join today, but that network looks at all of the protected characteristics. So it looks at disability, sex, gender reassignment, age, all of those things. And they're doing a dedicated session on each topic about once every 3 months. The next session is on LGBTQIA+. That's in September. So I'll send you a link to that if you're interested. That network really focuses on how to be an inclusive employer. Right, that's enough of me talking for now. Right, so we'll give everyone here just 1 to 2 minutes just to, you know, your name, your role, your organization, and just tell us about if you provide any services for to support neurodivergent people. And even if you don't, just an experience you've had or what you'd like to learn today. Right, so I'll stop sharing and I'll start calling on you. Oh, did I introduce myself? Yes, I'm Helen Roger. It's very warm in my flat. I'm the Training Development Officer at CVS, and I am not neurodivergent myself that I know of, but I've learned a lot from my neurodivergent colleagues, 2 of whom are here. So that's it from me, and next we'll ask Laura Shambrook.
Hey, I'm Laura. I work for CVS as the Operations Support Coordinator. I've got a personal interest in inclusion in workplaces and in volunteer settings. I'm a trustee at Disability Information Bureau, which is a charity in Macclesfield. And I am ADHD, so autism and ADHD. and I'll be speaking a bit later, so I'll keep this brief.
Thank you, Laura. And Dan?
Yeah, I'm Dan. I'm the communications officer and the volunteer manager for CVS. Personal interest in neurodivergence. Do a lot of work with volunteers as well that have experienced a lot of neurodiversity, and exploring a diagnosis myself at the moment as well.
Thank you, Dan. And Amira?
Hi, I'm Amira. I'm in a community development role at East Cheshire Hospice, which is the new role that I started last year, and I've changed spaces, but I'm interested in looking at and setting up projects with people who don't necessarily know about the hospice. But my interest in this group as well is personally driven as well. I'm like a late diagnosis of ADHD, but I have benefited from access to work grant, and I guess I'm quite passionate about sharing my experience and bringing it into my work. And I've spent the last 12 years or so working with young people and neurodivergent young people. So I think I answered your kind of overview.
Yeah, that's amazing, Amira. And yeah, congrats on the new role. I didn't see East Cheshire Hospice and I was like, that's not where Amira's from. Yeah, thank you. And Deb?
Hi folks, Deb Lindop, Community Development Officer for Cheshire East. I'm here today as a influencer, enabler, I hope, and supporter, most definitely a supporter of the voluntary community-based sector, and linking their work to the Nantwich and rural care community and the shared priority for the area, which is to improve the local offer to neurodivergent children and families, as well as adults. We are rich in evidence now of the inequalities that exist, the rise in diagnosis and unmet need. It's time for a bit of action and help to grow or support the sector of how that can adapt and provide better support to our residents. Really, that's the angle I'm coming at from today. Up to now, one big success was how my input, as well as other people, this is not on my own scenario, but definitely influenced the makeover of a youth club in Nantwich. I got them to consider what would it be like to be more inclusive, especially of the young neurodivergent audience. And they completely looked at the colour palette, the space, how they used it, the lighting, and those little adjustments. It was brilliant, a brilliant makeover, and very neurodivergent friendly. They've even got a little book nook and sensory space that was all about social value of a local developer. So that's me. Any kind of like inroads to those sorts of projects, I'd like a few of my fingerprints over it, because it needs to happen. More of that type of action needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. And that it's amazing to hear you're having that impact at sort of the community level. Yeah, Nantwich is lucky to have you. We'll have a catch up after this. And Rachel?
Sorry, you caught me by surprise then. I was just thinking about the last few things that Deb was saying. I'm Rachel. First and foremost, I'm mum to Erin, my beautiful neurodivergent, mad as a box of frogs, very high functioning autistic and ADHD daughter. During the process of her diagnosis, I received a diagnosis of ADHD myself. I was first introduced to what I might be able to do in the workplace to support colleagues through this session with yourselves last year. And I am trying to see if we can organise with management some sort of neurodivergence champions in the workplace so that there is go-to support for colleagues. I've found that is where I'm up to informally anyway, but things that are formally done and on the surface aren't as let's just say I have a lot of people that come to me and chat, but it's very cloak and dagger. They're not as open about their diagnosis that they've either got pending or that they've already had. I think there have been a few changes, and certainly my immediate colleagues are all very supportive of each other when they know about these things, but I think things could be done in the wider trust, and I'd like to be quite selfishly a part of that, because one day my daughter is going to be going into a workplace of some sort, and I think it's really important that all of us are doing these things now, because it shapes a future where, yes, people still struggle, but superpowers can be recognised and utilised. So rather than having to fit into a mould, we can mould workplaces to champion people with special skills. And that's me.
Thanks so much, Rachel. And yeah, that's part of what all this network is about, is creating that culture where everyone can talk about it, where we're making it inclusive for people. So thank you.
Sorry, because of my ADHD, I didn't actually say where I work, did I? I ranted on about that. I am the administrator for CHOC Community Care, working at East Cheshire NHS Trust. So I'm basically mum to 22 clinicians. I'm the only clerical member of the team. I work with the district nurses, the therapists, and the ACPs.
Amazing. Mum of many hats. Thank you, Rachel. And Lorraine?
Hi, I'm Lorraine. I'm voluntary manager of Drop and Shop at Nantwich Methodist Church, which is an inclusive provision. Primary school age children can be dropped off for a couple of hours, free throw play. We have a sensory room thanks to the National Lottery. We also have training in place. We have one-to-one support sessions for parents, which we've commissioned Smart Bright to use. And also we have got funding for staff, but at the moment have been unable to recruit. So we're looking for an organisation to work with who can send us staff, and we will pay the bill for those staff on a Saturday morning. We're currently open twice a month, first and third Saturdays, and we would want to open every week. So we're there's good news and there's concerning news, because we're also short of volunteers. So if we're to keep going and offer that support to parents, carers and the children, then we need the more volunteers and more the paid staff, so we need to work with somebody else. We also have the majority of our children, I think she'll confirm, are neurodiverse, whether they've got diagnoses or not, but it isn't exclusive for neurodiverse children. We've just tried to make the space as suitable as we can.
Perfect. Thank you, Lorraine. And we do, if you're looking for volunteers, we have a volunteering portal. You can post roles on there free of charge.
Yeah, we've been on it for a long time and not got any responses at all. I'm sorry.
No, we've heard like mixed reviews. Otherwise, there is the Cheshire East has a volunteering portal. Or if you drop me an email afterwards, we can maybe do a push in our next e-bulletin. And the same for staff to advertise jobs. So yeah, drop me an email after this. I'm sure we'll find you. Unless anyone on the call today knows of any volunteers or staff. We'll come to that later, but thank you, Lorraine. That's great to hear. And Etienne?
Hi, everyone. I'm Etienne. I'm fairly new to CVS as the Sector Development Officer with a focus on our mental health alliances. So yeah, neuro-inclusion is obviously kind of paramount to a lot of the organizations and memberships we work with. And there's obviously a large correlation between kind of neurodiversity and mental health. So it's something I'm really kind of passionate about and want to understand and want to support the organizations we work with to just have that baseline of really good governance and the ability to support anyone and everyone. So yeah, it's good to be here and hear from everyone else as well.
Thank you, Etienne. I didn't get to properly meet you the other day. I think I was on a call and you were wandering into the office, but lovely to have you. And Neil?
Hello, I'm Neil, expert by experience with CWP in the adult autism team. So I do learner support, things like hubs, online, waiting well, late diagnosed autistic, and then even later inattentive ADHD. So I've got a double dose of things. I'm also an ambassador for the Cheshire Neurodivergent community, which is an increasing number self-help and advice group, and also do socials as well. So at the moment, I'm a little bit even more brain foggy because I'm halfway through a dose of shingles. So bear with me if I suddenly start grimacing, 'cause it's not exactly pleasant.
Oh, thank you, Neil, and thank you for joining, regardless of shingles. That can be really, I had it at uni, very unpleasant. Thank you, Neil. And Alison?
Oh, hi, I'm Alison Chu from Nuts for Together. Please excuse the blurry video. We haven't quite worked out what's going on. So I work for Nuts for Together, which is a charity in Knutsford. We work with adults over 18, anyone over 18 with a WA16 postcode. So we have a one-to-one befriending service that's aimed at people that may not be able to get out of the home, whether for mobility, mental health, social anxiety kind of reasons. And that's we have volunteers that go out to do that. And then we do a wellbeing on a Wednesday. That's why I was a little bit late coming in. And we do a talking cafe on a Tuesday, as well as my manager and I both do one-to-one work with people in their homes. My experience of neurodivergence is I was diagnosed with inattentive ADHD in October last year. It was a long battle for 3 years to even get it agreed that I could have the assessment. But that I had to reach mental health crisis before that happened. So that's my personal interest. But my background was social work for 20 years with children, many of whom were neurodivergent, and also with their parents in hindsight. And I'm also trained as a learning disability nurse. I'm no longer registered, so we've got that interest. But a number of clients now that we are supporting are people that are neurodivergent, whether it be ADHD or autism, who are really struggling to access services and are finding that a lot of them are saying they're struggling to find anywhere, particularly in Cheshire East, to find support, or they're getting diagnosed late in life, but there's no follow-up. They're just told, yes, you're autistic, yes, you've got ADHD, and then nothing changes. And I think there's a lot of almost grief after that for the life that they feel they should have had, and also that sense of that, I've got one person who's really desperate to try and make friends, but never seems to get past the acquaintance stage. So it's hence why I joined, to try and hopefully pick people's brains and come up with ways to support clients, but also places to signpost people to as well.
Thank you, Alison. And yeah, and that's so common now, of people have to wait so long to get diagnosed, and they put so many barriers in place. And then even when you get a diagnosis, it's like, there you go. Now what? Yeah, but we can talk on that a little bit later. Thank you, Alison. And Molly?
Hi, it's been really nice to hear everyone's backgrounds. I'm Molly, so I'm a volunteer for Nantwich Museum, and I started as like a regular volunteer 6 months ago, but I mentioned to my really brilliant manager, Kate, that I was really interested in helping with accessibility. So it's really interesting to hear of Deb, who obviously has done so many good things for the Nantwich Youth Club, and then Lorraine, I've heard about Drop and Shop. So it's really good to have put some faces to names. But the reason I'm so passionate about accessibility and equality and diversity is because I was born with cerebral palsy. I wasn't meant to walk or talk, or I've got significant brain damage. And my experience of school was brilliant, because after nursery, I went to a special educational needs nursery, I had daily physio, and then I went to a mainstream school. I excelled at school, but then when I was 14, I got an illness that triggered a virus that triggered like multiple illnesses, and I had to drop out of school. And my mum had like the fight to get my education and things like that. And so I've got physical disabilities and then disabilities due to ill health. And then separately, my mum thinks I'm on some kind of spectrum. My mum's got ADHD, and we see things like in opposite ways. But because I have to go to hospital appointments like every week for my physical health, I haven't got around to going down the diagnosis route. In a way, I do want to do that at some point. But for me, I guess things are more pressing in other areas, not that it wouldn't be pressing to get a diagnosis. But most of my friends have got autism. But yeah, I've just got a real passion for just making the environment of somewhere easier for people, because it could be just so easy to make things easier, and there's all these barriers all the time. So I've got a real sort of passion to learn and help. And so a few weeks ago, I gave a talk on accessibility at the museum for the volunteers and staff. And we're looking at different ways of making the Nantwich Museum more accessible, and trying to get different members of the community that may not otherwise think that a museum is for them into a museum. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thanks so much, Molly. And yeah, that experience will help you so much. Oh, it sounds like it's already doing so much in your role and making the museum accessible. So thank you. You're in the right place. And Oliver?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Oliver Downing. I'm lead commissioner for learning disabilities and autism at Cheshire West and Chester Council. So we don't provide any services directly, but we do commission various services, and I suppose indirectly we do have the statutory services that we support people through adult social care. But yeah, I'm here today to just look at maybe either working with your own Neuro-Inclusion Network on a Cheshire-wide basis, or learning from yours to look at developing our own equivalent in Cheshire West.
Thank you, Oliver. And yeah, I was discussing this with our CEO because we don't want to exclude anyone from this. We sort of said we'll start off focusing on Cheshire East, and then I think Garrett joined the last one. But yeah, there are so many groups that provide services across Cheshire, and by all means, invite any groups to this one, but we can discuss maybe developing a Cheshire West dedicated one. Thanks, Oliver. And Marie, am I saying that right? Marit? You're muted. Oh no, you're not muted. But we can't hear you. We can't hear you, Marit. I'll just go. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, great. I'm Marit from Stage 40. We try to help parents and adults and children with autism. So we have for adults groups during daytime and evening time. We also have the launch path where we try, because many autistic people fell out their jobs, we try to find we try to give them confidence. We have an own shop in our village. We try to increase their confidence and then help them to a job. So we connect to places where they could be able to work. We also have clubs for children. We have training for adults and for parents. I'm outreach worker, which means that everyone who comes in most of the time comes at the outreach. I'm one of the three. So they come ask for help basically after or during having a diagnosis or on the waiting list. And they get a diagnosis and they basically don't know what to do. And then most of the time they come to us. Well, I am autistic as well, but not diagnosed. And most of the people working here are autistic or have family or connection with autism.
Thank you, Mara. Can you just repeat which organisation you're from? It cut off a bit at the start.
Space for Autism.
Yes, thank you. Great to have you here as sort of a specialist.
Sorry about this. Just not working.
It's good. You're sort of in a spotlight on the side.
Yeah.
I think we've done. Have I done everyone? Have I missed anyone? Shout up if I have. Nope. Super. We've had our apologies from about 4 or 5 people who also really wanted to join today, but they hope to join the next one. And that includes groups like St. Paul's. They have a futures program, which like supports people who are autistic with volunteering, and lots of other groups that I could go on about, but hopefully they'll join the next one. So anything in chat? Yeah, just Deb saying happy to share. Okay, well, thank you all so much for that. I think it's worthwhile doing that because I don't know if any of you, like I've worked in the charity sector for nearly 10 years now, and there's still groups I don't know about, even in Crewe, which is insane. So it's good just to hear what you're all doing. Right, let me just share my screen again. Right, and I think with that, I'm done. I can stop sharing, and my lovely colleague Laura will be presenting.
Okay, sorry, multitasking. Let me present that. Yay, there we go. Okay, so I'm Laura. I work at CVS since I think 2023, but before that I did work as a library assistant for many years at Cheshire East Council. So I'm going to be talking about my experiences both at CVS and also with the council, as well as looking at specific reasonable adjustments, both that I've been the beneficiary of and ones that I think are really effective. It's going to be, you'll have to bear with me because my ADHD side of my brain tends to jump around a bit. So I'm hoping that this comes out in a comprehensible order, but I will share the slide deck afterwards. And of course, we can discuss in breakout rooms and we'll do questions as well. So I thought I would start with some examples of not inclusive design from my previous workplace, which was Crewe Lifestyle Centre. So if you've ever been in there, it's a big building, and Crewe Library originally had their own building and they were moved into the Lifestyle Centre in 2016. So I did spend quite a few years working there. And I thought it was a really good example of what a not inclusive space looks like, which is a real shame because it's a new-ish building. And I understand that some groups were consulted when they designed this building. And one of the problems with reasonable adjustments can be that there's money involved in some cases, and in others you're stuck with the building you're in. You don't necessarily have a choice of office or workspace, especially if you're a community group. You might have free space in another organisation's building. You might not have a lot of money to develop your own building. So there's lots of reasons why places can not be as inclusive as they could be. I don't want to be too negative about the council, because again, it's not like they've got loads of money, but I do have to say that it's one of the least inclusive places that I've worked in. And something that Rachel said about the NHS as well, it surprises me how large organisations can sometimes be less supportive than smaller ones. And I think that's partly to do with their sheer size, but also partly to do with there can be a tendency to do tick box exercises when it comes to things like inclusion and reasonable adjustment, especially if people in middle or upper management have no experience of things like neurodivergence. But just as an example, the picture on the left is what was originally the atrium of that building. So you can literally enter it on Moss Square and then walk out the other side. You can go straight through the other side and you come out near Home Bargains car park. It looks a little bit different to this now because obviously they've furnished it. This is an old picture, but it's a nightmare for sensory stuff. So it's massive, high, open plan, hard surfaces, sound bounces and echoes. It's very loud levels of background noise. You can't see it on that picture, but on the right-hand side is their cafe area. And then behind me on the left is the library entrance. They built the library with doors that propped open, so they're not automatic. So they're left open all day when the building is open, and all of the noise comes into the library building. So, you know, there's various things that are not great from that kind of open plan design for people with neurodivergence. If it's at all possible, try and have spaces that are more segmented so that people have a choice of where they're going. Another thing which is a great illustration of is pure white. I hate white walls. I just hate them. It hurts my eyes. It doesn't help my brain. I'm one of the autistic people that prefers a strong and vibrant color. It's something to do with brain wiring and stuff like that. It's also very clinical and uninteresting, etc. And another interesting thing to point out, which isn't necessarily to do with neurodivergence, but that floor is a nightmare for anyone with a visual impairment. It never ceases to astonish me, the stuff that people will do for a public building like that. How you're supposed to navigate that as someone with a visual impairment who needs strong contrast, baffled. So definitely not top marks for the lifestyle centre. And then these other three pictures are just a demonstration of the space that I had to work in. Now, I didn't know I was autistic when I first began to work in libraries. And once I was diagnosed and I did speak to my managers, they were extremely limited in the adjustments they could make for me, partly because of the nature of the building. And I did understand that, but it was still frustrating. So the top centre picture is a desk for the staff member to sit or stand at, well, basically to stand at, which I've got physical health conditions, not possible. So they had to buy basically bar stools for staff to perch on. It's very small, it's cluttered. You can see there's a screen that's been stood on the right-hand side of it because it was very frequent. Members of the public would stand behind you, stand right next to you, look at your screen, far too close for my personal space. And I would literally pull one of the big metal library trolleys that you put books on alongside the other side to box myself in. So you would have to do, and when COVID was around, that's a nightmare. You can't protect yourself. I actually had to be silent. I couldn't go into work. I was clinically vulnerable. There was no way to adjust that environment to protect someone like me. It's just not great design. The equipment that we have for libraries didn't fit on there because we have multiple pieces of kit, scanners, receipt printers. You can see that the whole of the library is just two big open spaces. So there's an upstairs and a downstairs, wide open. There's the study space is just tables in the middle of the room, totally useless for even, I would say, neurotypical people who are trying to actually study, because I don't know whether you've been in a library recently, but they're not quiet anymore. It's just impossible, and it's not the culture. You can see the computer suite there as well for the public to use. You're sitting very close to each other. It's not private. There's a lot of machines that you have to use yourself. That obviously there are staff around, but then you've got to be able to approach the staff. If you want to do the self-service option, the machines aren't that easy to use. So this is highlighting some of the stuff that isn't great. That particular building, there was one small room that staff would use as a staff room, an office, a storeroom, and a kitchen. So it was all kinds of things in one. So when you were supposed to be on break, you also had colleagues trying to work. The kitchen with all of its smells and noise was in the actual break room. One of the reasonable adjustments I asked for was a quiet space where I could go on my own. Now, there were 3 small meeting rooms in a big shared open plan office space that council staff were using. But you had to book those meeting rooms, and they were always booked out because people would book them on spec just in case they had to have a one-to-one or something. So I could never get a booking. So they said, oh, you can go and sit in your car and your lunch break. And I was like, that's fine, but I need to be able to park closer because there was no parking included and there wasn't really a close car park. So they had to, and to be fair, they did give me a parking permit so I could park as close as I could. But it's still not that comfortable when you're in your car. I couldn't really step away to have frequent breaks because the nature is that the library is quite big. You're timetabled to be on the inquiries desk for an hour, shelving for an hour. Then you have a break. Then you're on like a different desk for an hour. So you can't really step away in case someone comes to the desk and needs your assistance. And similarly, couldn't wear headphones because you can't wear headphones when you're customer facing, or I couldn't in that situation. And I will say that they weren't very trying to think of the word. It wasn't they were uninterested. It was almost like they were like, oh, what can we do? I didn't find it that helpful. And there's a few other slides where I'll talk a bit more about some things to do with that. I'll just very briefly go through the next two slides because it's just an overview of stuff you will already know, which is reasonable adjustments are changes to remove or reduce barriers. It's all about reducing barriers for people, and it can be changes to working patterns, different recruitment processes, providing information in different ways, specialist equipment. And the employer or the organisation should be proactive. That is the ideal way. That's not my experience with large organisations like the council. You very much have to be the person leading, your advocating for yourself and bringing up the conversation. And why reasonable adjustments are good for people and organisations. Probably all familiar with most of that. I wanted to separate off why it's good for people individually, because it actually impacts people's health and well-being. My conditions are improved by having better working conditions. I have a sense of belonging and acceptance at CVS that I haven't had before. My capacity for work is higher. I'm more productive. Because I'm able to be flexible around the hours that I work. So it fits in with my natural circadian rhythm. I can manage health conditions around it, but still retain like a core set of hours to be available for the organisation. So you can compromise and do stuff that's good for the organisation and good for the individual as well. One thing I did want to talk briefly about is the difference between equity and equality, because I feel like this is really important, and I feel like it comes up quite a bit, but it's not always talked about. So equality is it's an equality of opportunity, but it's not related to the outcome. So you can see on the picture on the left that everyone got an equal size box, but that was meaningless for some of the people in that picture. They all had the equal opportunity to stand on the box. And then if you look at the other side, equity, each person got the resource they needed for their particular circumstance. And the guy on the left didn't need any resources. He was fine, you could see. But one of the reasons I like this image is because it accidentally illustrates the social model of disability. People are disabled by their environment. They're not inherently wrong in and of themselves. The best solution would be to remove the fence, and then everyone benefits, whether you've got a disability or not. You're not stood behind a fence. So I think when we're thinking about reasonable adjustments and equity, diversity and inclusion, it's important to focus on the outcomes rather than the opportunities, because everyone having the same opportunity doesn't lead to everyone having an equity of outcome. So I wanted to include that. And inclusive workplaces in general for any kind of disability are really important for not only the well-being of the staff, but the success of the company as well, or the organization that you're working for. Because if you can show up and be your authentic self without having to do too much work with your sensory sensitivities or worrying about whether you will actually be able to physically do a task or use equipment that's provided, you're able to give so much more, and you have so much more opportunity to have a better work-life balance. And creating an inclusive environment can be really simple. Yes, you can provide training, but one of the things that I think is really important is actually creating an environment where people feel like they can talk about their needs, and not feel any stigma, not feel any fear of negative consequences resulting from disclosing information. So if organizations and managers and anyone involved really can try and have those supportive conversations, if managers can be open about their own conditions and lead by example, really does go a long way to allowing that sort of inclusion to arise. Challenging inappropriate behavior is a really big one, especially if you're in a position of relative power. So you're a manager or a supervisor. I've had experiences of workplace bullies, and I was not supported by managers, and it is really devastating. It's really detrimental to people's health and work lives. And there are lots of resources to help have supportive conversations, ways to get information and training and things like that for managers, and to not be afraid to just seek out the information and to ask questions of each other, because most people like myself, although it shouldn't be expected of disabled people to explain and educate, that a lot of us are quite happy to discuss this sort of thing within our organizations because it directly affects us. So never be afraid to ask someone. And I just wanted to show this as a sort of counterpoint to the first slide, which was the library. This is the CVS office at the moment. Now, it's not ideal because no building ever will be, but this is far more accessible for me. And I think also for Helen will say for her as well. So we are fortunate that we have a building which is a converted house, so there are multiple smaller rooms, so we can choose to just have a couple of us in a room. So me and Helen share this one. Dan and another colleague shared the other room. We have staff coming in and out. They hot desk, I suppose. They don't have to, but they do, because they're not bothered by doing that every so often. Whereas I am very bothered by hot desking. So one of the biggest things you can do for someone with neurodivergence, in my opinion, is to give them a dedicated workspace that they control. So they have it set up how they would like it set up, so that when they come to work, they know exactly where they're going and exactly what it's going to look like. Please don't sit at someone's desk if they're neurodivergent and move things. Please don't do that. It's so stressful. And I think that's probably stressful for a neurotypical person as well. If you need a hot desk, like our colleagues will use one of the unused desks. They won't come and sit at my desk, for example. So having that private space, even better, is a space where the windows open. They did not open in the lifestyle centre, so I can control the airflow. We've got fans and heaters. We couldn't control the heating in the lifestyle centre, so it was either too hot or too cold. It was very stuffy. Me and Helen choose not to have the overhead lights on in our office, whereas Dan has the lights on in his office because that's what he prefers. This is what we prefer. Daylight. We have a lamp if we need it, if it's getting darker. We've got all of the standard adjustable computer equipment, which I think a lot of people will find their organisation is quite good at supplying now. Helen actually has a special desk that enables her to work standing up. We were all bought chairs that are comfortable and fully adjustable. All kinds of little things like that, which are relatively affordable. Most of the stuff we've got, I think, probably came off Amazon, and some of it you can get funded for. I will come on to that. But that to me, blinds, opening windows, lights that the staff member can control, it really, really helps. I know if you're stuck with a building where you've got more open plan style working areas, it is very difficult for you to have individual people controlling lights and stuff. But even then, for example, one of the offices in the Disability Information Bureau, we've taken the bulb out of one light strip. So 2 people working on one side of the office can have the overhead light on. But then my colleague who is sitting on the other side of the office, who has the visual impairment, can have her space at the right darkness. There's no overhead light interfering with her vision and her screen adapters and stuff. So you can find workarounds. Portable heaters and fans can help people control their environment a little bit more. And where possible, if you can just have people can have a space that is just their own, is so helpful. There's loads of different examples of reasonable adjustments. And what I've done on this slide is I've added some organisations. These are all links. So when you get the slide deck, you can just click on one of these. And I've linked to the pages where these organisations are advising on reasonable adjustments for the workplace. Accreditation, for example, that you can get as an organisation. Excuse me, the National Autistic Society do an Autism Friendly Award, which CVS are going to look at. Some of them do cost a little bit of money, I think probably about £200 or £300, so not always accessible to all organisations, but you can certainly use their resources to get the ideas without actually doing the full accreditation. Most organisations who employ staff will probably be part of the Disability Confidence Scheme, and again, CVS are still at the lower level of that, but that is a project we will be looking at moving up to the next level. There's 3 levels. The British Dyslexia Association and ADHD UK have quite a few resources on easy adjustments that people can make themselves and that workplaces can make. Working arrangements is really, really helpful if it's at all possible for the organisation. So clearly some places are customer facing, or you're working with clients and you will need to be in certain hours. So for example, the library was open 9 till 6. I had to work in those hours. There was some scope for doing different shift patterns, but not as much. Whereas now, one of the biggest differences made to me at CVS is that I work my core hours 10 till 3. Which means that I can take my time in the morning, because I'm not a morning person, do my core hours when most people are around in the office and might be sending inquiries through. And then I can have a nice substantial break at 3 o'clock, which by that point, I'm no longer productive. I'm very tired. I need to step away. And then I come back in the evening and do another 2 hours to make up my 7 for the day. Really life-changing for me. I can work from home. I am doing today because I had this to do. If it's at all possible to do that hybrid, that flexible working hours, really makes a difference. And then all of the neurodivergent specific stuff that I think we've talked about before and are probably relatively common. One that I personally put in there was relaxed dress code. I cannot tell you how much energy I've wasted over my life resisting the irritation of women's clothes. And I wear trainers now all the time. As a young woman, before I was diagnosed, I was trying to wear the makeup. I hate necklaces around my neck. Can't stand them. Lanyards. Try and find a different way. If someone has to have an ID badge, I can't stand a lanyard around my neck, even if it's fabric. Like, I wish I could. Every day at the library, resisting the irritation of the lanyard, just used up a few more spoons, if you know what I mean, and if I could just have pinned it on my, top, that would have been great. Wearing clothes that you feel comfortable in. They can still be, you don't have to be there in shorts and it doesn't have to be inappropriate, but if you can wear casual clothes, that usually makes a big difference. And one of the other ones that I think isn't always focused on a lot is the extra time to process information and respond to questions or things that you're supposed to be, like in a meeting, you're supposed to be contributing to. So one of the things that I was talking to my ex-boss, Catherine, who used to be the CEO of CVS about, she said one of the things she does is that she always has post-it notes. So that if she's in the middle of a meeting or a talk, she thinks of a question, she knows she's going to forget it we might move on before she can get it in. She'll write it on the post-it note to remind herself. So there's really, really simple things that you can do. And like Helen said, you can put stuff in the chat if you don't want to speak, or you think of something afterwards, all that kind of stuff. And I think when people who aren't neurodivergent or don't need sort of adjustments, when those people actually use some of these techniques and coping things, and not only does it make it less intimidating for people who do actually need those adjustments to function, it also is beneficial for everyone who isn't neurodivergent. Most adjustments to the workplace and to working patterns and ways of working benefit everyone, not just people with specific conditions. Access to work, it's a government scheme, so this links you to gov.uk. There's loads of very clear information on there about it. There is a very long wait. I waited about a year for my appointment, but it was worth it. They gave me so much stuff that I wasn't expecting. I think I requested a Remarkable tablet to help me manage multiple notebooks and pieces of paper. The one that really made a huge difference to my life was the coaching sessions, which I did not expect them to offer me, and which they did and paid for. And they were so good and were so life-changing for me that I continued with that coach. I'm now a private client of hers. It was just amazing. There's nothing like having a mentor, someone who really gets it and has the time and the space to sit with someone. One of the things I think is really important for like volunteers and even staff is if they have a mentor or a buddy. Not all organizations are big enough to have a champion for neurodivergence, but sometimes it's helpful just to have one particular person who is open to you approaching at any time for a conversation, who is expecting you to do that, rather than thinking, oh, I wonder if that colleague's got time for me and if they'd be sympathetic. So actually having very specific people in place and known about really helps someone with neurodivergence feel comfortable. And I think that's that person-centered, that person to speak to, check things with, that is probably even more important to me than some of the software. Don't feel discouraged if the software they recommend doesn't suit. Motion does not suit me, but it was worth a go. Genio is great, so don't worry. The organisations that you all work for, with the exception probably of the NHS and the council, who are too big as organisations, small organisations don't have to pay. The way it works is CVS paid for the stuff and then claimed it back. So you do have to have the money to pay the upfront, and then you go through a process where you claim the money back, because we were small enough that the government would pay for it all. It is a pain that you do have to have the funds available to do the initial purchase of the stuff. But most of your organisations would get this access to work for your staff free. It is for staff, for employees, but there's a lot of stuff that you can do for free for volunteers as well. And I just wanted to do this slide because this is based on things people have said to me within my hearing to me before I was diagnosed, after I was diagnosed. There's I feel like there's a common misconception about reasonable adjustments. You're getting an unfair advantage, when it's really not. Like, if you go back to that image of the box, everybody got the same box and two of them still couldn't see. You're getting something that brings you to the same level of advantage as your colleague who doesn't have the particular condition or impairment that you have. It's not about what we prefer, that we're getting extra breaks just because we, want extra breaks. One of the saddest ones that I hear is, I've managed all these years, why can't they? And my response to that is, I'm really sorry, genuinely, that you've struggled. How can we help now? Just because you suffered doesn't mean. That one really surprised me, but has been said by several people that I know. And yeah, to the bottom one, everyone should get the support they need. Absolutely. Goes back to what I said before about reasonable adjustments often benefit neurotypical people, or people who don't need specific or don't have protected characteristics. And I just put this team photo in here just because 5 of the people in that photo have a health condition or a disability. And I dare you to try and pick out which ones they are. It's not obvious. It's not always obvious. There isn't anything that an autistic person looks like. There isn't a typical person with cerebral palsy. There isn't a typical person who's a paraplegic. All of this kind of stuff. Most disabilities and health conditions are invisible. And just a quick personal anecdote, I used to work with a guy who was so judgmental about people who would use the lift in the library. And he'd be like, why do they need to use the lift? They can walk up the bloody stairs, as if they were lazy. And I was like, might have a heart condition, might have asthma, might have chronic fatigue, loads and loads and loads of things that maybe they just want to ride the elevator. What does it matter? If you don't want to go up the stairs and you're tired of going up the stairs, you take the elevator, no one's going to think less of you. So there's some really weird attitudes that I've come across that I find such a shame. But I did just want to address that, because the stigma is a problem, and bear it in mind when you're in your work situations or in your volunteering situations, that people will have come across a lot of that, and sometimes you kind of absorb it without realizing it. It's just part of the culture. So I've probably gone longer than Helen thought I would, so I just put a summary slide in there. And again, more than half of the people in that team photo, which is a bit older, have a health condition or a disability. We're all stood up there. So again, I bet you couldn't pick them out and what was going on, obviously apart from me. So yeah, it's a process. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to have conversations. Nothing's ever perfect. Do the best you can with what you've got. For me, the intent is often as important as the actual action, but action does help as well, as far as possible. Let me see if I can do this right. Stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you so much, Laura. A little round of applause. That was lovely. So we've had loads of comments in the chat. A few questions for you, but I'll just open it up now. Does anyone have any questions for Laura or comments? Go ahead, Rachel.
Sorry.
Molly wants to go first. Obviously keen.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't see who was waiting. Just wanted to say that was brilliant, Laura. So glad you're working somewhere now that fully champions you, not just adjusts you, but like champions you. And I think everything you've said I've experienced in different ways, and especially like the assumptions people make. I think that was really good to point out and good to like, yeah, just sort of address, because you're absolutely right in everything you're saying. No one's asking for any more than the next person. You're just asking for the things you need to function at a basic level. So because it's already unfair, it just stops the unfairness being as unfair, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to say that was really informative, and I'm glad to hear you're supported.
Thank you. Yeah, I do think it's important to bring up the challenges as well as the good things, because we learn from mistakes and we learn from things that don't quite work right. And I think it's important to try different things. And one thing I would say is, like, with where I mentioned the software and I didn't get on with one, but I love the other one. It's the same with the reasonable adjustments. If organizations can provide space for people to try things, like I tried several different patterns of working hours before I landed on the one I'm doing right now. And I was given space to do that, which was really amazing. But like, don't feel like if the first thing you try you can never try something else, because also your condition will change for a lot of us. A lot of health conditions are fluctuating. You have good days and bad days. So bear that in mind as a manager and supervisor, but also as an individual, life is like an iterative process. It changes. Your needs will change, and that's okay. And I know that can be hard for organizations because they've got lots of restrictions on them financially and stuff, but it doesn't have to be that difficult to keep adjusting.
Thanks, Laura. And Rachel, did you have a question?
There's no other comment, really. It's quite nice hearing other people talk and sort of poking thoughts you've already had in your head. And I think where I am, and like a lot of big organisations, there's always going to be barriers and disability from which to highlight all the problems. But as you said, there are adjustments that can be made. There are things that can be done that don't cost anything. So budget doesn't come into it. And I think straight away I've taken that away. I'm trying to talk to immediate management about the things we can do, because it will benefit everybody, rather than it having to always be a focus on this will suit a group of individuals. If there is an adjustment that can be made, then why not make it? I'm trying to sort of go in a kind of thought process with it. So yeah, I'm enjoying. I'm not sort of staying quiet on purpose through the session. I think my goal for today is to listen to everybody's experiences and see what I can take that's new from that, because there might be things that haven't been thought of here that can be tried, because why not? And there's no problem in trying them, and everybody will benefit.
Absolutely. And I think when you're with a bigger organization like the health service or a council, it can be really difficult to get it more personal, because there's just so many people. And you're relying almost on having managers or supervisors or people higher up who maybe have lived experience, because this isn't like the case for everyone. I've met a lot of neurotypical people who do have empathy, but it can sometimes be really difficult to get people to understand exactly why you need the adjustments that you need. And I think coming at it from being quite specific about one small thing at a time is a really effective way to do it. Definitely.
All adjustments, definitely, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was also a question, Laura, in the chat that I thought you might know. Does the Macclesfield Disability Information Bureau still run a phone helpline service? Do you know? I thought Laura might know.
So at the moment, they don't really do official advice over the phone. So if you want assistance with your benefits, or you want to see the support coach to look at accessing things that will help you out of social isolation, will help you with employment skills, with volunteering, you would make a face-to-face appointment with either Duncan, who is the welfare advice expert, or with Sasha, who is the support coach. But having said that, when you ring up, you can literally ring up and ask anything. And especially if you get Dom, one of the volunteers on reception, he is so knowledgeable and so friendly. He will give you all the advice and the signposting in the world. So you can ring up just, from, is there a local taxi service that is accessible for wheelchairs, all the way through to, can you help me with this benefit form? The DIB has just kind of risen like a phoenix from the ashes over the last couple of years. My colleague Aoife at CVS has just got funding for the DIB to continue because it was a bit uncertain for a while. So there is going to be a sort of relaunch of communications and information shortly, which will make it a bit clearer and will reconnect with a lot of the services, social prescribers and all that kind of stuff that we were. But yes, if you've got a question, do ring up. If it is a small team at the moment, please call back if you don't get an answer, or email if you prefer, and we will do our best.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, thank you so much, Laura. That was amazing. And yeah, I've learned so much from Laura about neurodivergence. So thank you for being our neuro champion. Right, we'll take a short break now, 5 minutes. So come back here at about 2:15, and then we'll go into breakouts. Thank you.